Hey guys, welcome to another edition of the Nashville Women's Health Podcast. It's your host, Amy Bailey, and it has been a hot minute since I've recorded a podcast, and y'all will hear all about that soon, all my reasons for kind of putting a pause on this, but today is not that day. Today, we're going to focus on Olivia. I've got Olivia from LivWell Coaching here, and we're going to share VBAC stories. She has a story that is just much different than mine, and I really think it's great to kind of get it out there. So if you are trying for a VBAC or you've had one, maybe her story will resonate with you more than mine. So I just think it's great for everybody to share their different experiences to help educate moms on what to expect or just to normalize what you are feeling. So, hey, Olivia.
Hey.
And you've been on my podcast before too. So you are not
Yeah,
a new face to us at all.
it's been a hot minute as well.
Yeah. Okay. So kind of, first of all, how many weeks postpartum are you right now?
I will be 8 tomorrow.
8 tomorrow. Okay, so she's got a brand new baby. This is her second. So, and if you don't mind me kind of bringing up, you had a loss in between there too.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a lot to kind of pack in here and unpack throughout your journey. But kind of tell our listeners just a little bit about your first birth. And I know we're not going to kind of spend the most time on
Yeah.
that, but I think it's good for people to kind of hear the C-section journey as well.
Okay. Do you want some of the pregnancy or just kind of start at birth?
You start wherever you want, whatever you think
Okay.
is important to share at this point.
Well, my first pregnancy, I think it's always important for people to know, like, I knew nothing about public health, and I was at that time also a personal trainer, but I still knew nothing about public health. And just the massive changes a body goes through in pregnancy and postpartum, and like, how do you adjust your fitness and your lifestyle to take care of your core and pelvic health? So I didn't know any of that stuff, but I had a pretty textbook pregnancy with my first with Nora. Really, like, things were great. They were smooth. And I wanted to have a natural birth. I took a 12-week Bradley method class, like, did all the things. And I was set on all the things, and we all have a birth plan.
Yes.
But it's more like a birth hope list than like an actual plan, because nothing went according to plan. So, kind of condensing, but like 37-hour labor, so very long. And somewhere in the middle of that, I had an epidural. I think it was like 12 hours in at that point. And just, man, I wish I had a dollar for every time I said I just didn't know. Because I just didn't know. But at that point in time, a nurse checked me and was like, "Oh, you're a 5." And I'd only dilated 2 centimeters in that 12-hour time, 3 to a 5. And I thought, if it took 12 hours to get to a 5 and I got to get to a 10, like, this could take a really long time. I didn't know that dilation can change like snap of a finger. Like, that can that is not an indicator of where I'm at in labor, but I didn't know. So I got an epidural. I think that slowed things down. And I finally I got to the pushing phase. But like, she, now knowing what I know, I
Mhm.
think her head was stuck. But
Yeah.
nobody adjusted my position. Nobody mentioned trying to like turn her, like, none of that was mentioned to me. And I just got to the point where I was tired and I was done and I didn't care how they got her out, just get her out. So I had a C-section. It wasn't an emergency. And I feel like that's important to note, because I think that's why my recovery wasn't maybe a nightmare. I feel like a lot of those types of recoveries are harder when they were an emergency and
I
the doctor
agree.
hurry, right?
Yes.
So mine was not an emergency. Nora was doing amazing. She was happy as a clam in there.
Aw.
Obviously. No. I was done though. So I had a C-section. And that just, as you know, Amy, because you've definitely walked with me through that entire journey, really. But I had to grieve that birth experience. And it I just felt so surprised by like everything about postpartum. Like, I was wrecked and I just had no idea like what body I was in
Mm.
after, in that first weeks, months. I was like, "What is this?" Like, I remember how I used to feel, and this is not it. Like, this feels weird and so different. Um, and there was something else that I was thinking about and I just lost it. So help me bring it back in, Amy.
I just want to bring up the part that you had to grieve, kind of the birth that you thought you were going to have versus the birth that you ended up having. I think
Yeah.
that's so real for moms to hear. And Something we say, and you said it earlier before I started recording, like, I'm fine, it's fine. We say that all the time when we're completely not fine.
Yeah.
And so taking that space to tell our birth stories and to grieve what we thought was going to happen, even if the baby is healthy and we're healthy and everything's
Yeah.
fine, putting that in parentheses, we're not fine a lot of times because we're trying to reconcile what went on versus what we wanted to go on or how we expected it to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I remembered what it was,
Great.
what they told me after my C-section. So they told me that my pubic bone and my sacrum were too close together, and so there was no way that baby was coming out. I didn't know. So I just believed them. I thought, okay, well, that it's just my anatomy. Like that just wasn't going to happen. And then I finally saw Amy, and this was like, I don't know, at least 15 months postpartum because I was trying to rehab myself and I gave up and I finally saw you. And you were the first person, Amy, that planted a seed of that not being true. You
Yeah.
said, I've never seen a vagina a baby can't come out of.
And there
And
are reasons babies get stuck. I'm not saying babies
yeah,
can't get stuck, but I do
yeah,
believe your pelvis can accommodate, in most situations, babies. And I don't like that blanket statement, your pelvis is too small. I mean, we've all seen those super petite people who give birth to 10 pounders, you know? So
yeah. And I feel like because I never want to have a blanket and say always and never here. But
exactly.
I think it's more often than not, pelvis is too small is used and it's not
I
actually the
agree. I
case.
agree with that.
And but I didn't know. So you planted a seed for me and it really stuck. And I was like, really? Huh. And that that just like I held on to that. I don't remember what year that was, like 2022. And I just kept uncovering more and more evidence about like, oh, like I can influence the position of my baby or my pelvis. I can do pelvic mobility and connect with my pelvic floor and release work and like all these different things, modalities to help set me up for the best success I can. Yes, we can't control everything, but I learned so much in that time and heard so many stories about pelvis being too small. And so that planted a seed. Like I didn't officially decide I wanted to do a VBAC until somewhere in the middle, not in quite the middle, but maybe second trimester with Emmy, with this most recent baby.
Mhm.
'Cause I was scared to say it, I was scared to commit, but I just couldn't make up my mind. I kept weighing C-section and VBAC, and C-section in a lot of ways felt more convenient, it felt more guaranteed, like, I wanted to go into a VBAC. What I wanted was to feel, no matter what, I wanted to feel like I was a part of my birth experience. I want instead of like a zombie, because I was so dead by the time I had Nora. Like I just wasn't present. I couldn't hold her because I was falling asleep and I felt like I would drop her. So like I just felt like I was just not an active participant in my labor and birth. And I just
And you had
wanted,
a long labor. So,
yeah,
just comparing and contrasting, someone who may have a scheduled C-section may not feel that much exhaustion. They're tired and whatever,
exactly.
but you had labored before for a very long time. Your body was tired.
And so that's what I was like weighing, was like, okay, a C-section, like at least I could go in and say, I want a clear drape. I want skin to skin, which I had said in my other birth plan. But I feel like if I went in on a scheduled one, it would be more likely to to have that experience. And like, it just felt safe to me. The VBAC felt risky because they're
Yes.
still don't have a guaranteed outcome. I can do all the things and it might still not pan out, and I knew that. And I don't know what finally flipped the switch for me. I think it was probably the coach that I had helping me in my pregnancy. And she's like, I think if you don't go for it, you're always going to wonder. And
Yes.
like, I was like, I sat with that for a couple of days and I thought, she's right.
Yep.
I I have to do this for me. And my sweet supportive husband sort of he had a hard time with that. Like cuz
Mhm.
he watched me like suffer and he didn't want to see that happen again. And
Yeah.
in his mind, cuz he's a man, it's like, "Oh, this would just be easier, just like schedule the thing and get it done. Like, why
Baby.
do you want this so much?" And I think only women can understand that. As like I just wanted that. And so I don't know where you want me to pick up in this story, but that birth was so redemptive for me.
Yeah. You mentioned kind of the unknown, the fear. You kind of had some knowns with the C-section.
Yeah.
And then there's that just fear of the unknown. But I do think, and not everybody gets a redemptive birth too, and
Yeah.
that's hard. But I do think there's something very valid in that you don't understand this unless you are a woman wanting a vaginal birth. And some women don't want that for themselves.
Yeah.
They're like, let's just do a C-section, let's plan it, let's get it done. But if you're a woman who wants a C-section, there is, and I can speak to this because I've had that feeling, like I felt broken. Like,
Yeah.
why couldn't I do this? What's wrong with me? And for me, I was the same way as you. Like, if I don't try this, I'll always wonder,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Okay.
So where do you want me to pick up with that? I
Okay,
can.
so I kind of want to jump back a little bit because you were a personal trainer before you got pregnant. And then when I saw you after Nora was here and a toddler, you were already starting your path into pregnancy and postpartum training. So
Yeah.
you were getting some education
I was
and
getting the education, but I was doing it on the side. Like I wasn't ready to be like, this is what I do. I was too
yeah,
afraid. It's like, I'm just gonna learn more for me.
yeah, but you were starting to kind of
Yeah.
open your eyes to this whole world and how to make a difference in this world and learning how our bodies work and all of that. Yeah. Okay. So then at some point you're like, hey, I'm ready to get pregnant again,
Yeah.
right? So kind of walk
Yeah.
us through that.
Um, well, it definitely took me, let's see, Nora was 3 before I was like, let's try again. Because
Yeah.
everything about postpartum, birth and postpartum for me was freaking hard. Like I just struggled. And I hate the term easy baby, but Nora was just really a unicorn. That's what I called it. Like she slept good, she was awesome, and I still struggled. Like
Yeah.
mentally, I really, really struggled through all of that. So it took me a long time to be like, okay, I can do
Mhm.
this again. I want to do this again. Sort of the newborn days. I would pass on those because they're so hard. But like the reward on the other side is so
Oh
worth.
gosh.
So
Yeah.
I was like, my husband and I were both like, okay, we're gonna do this again. So we thankfully, and I know this isn't everybody's story, like with fertility, like getting pregnant. It didn't take super long for us to get pregnant. But definitely rocked our world. Like you mentioned, I had an early loss, like 7 weeks. And that, man, like you just don't understand that until you've been through it. Like yeah, I knew some people that had experienced that, and you just say like, I'm so sorry. But man, when you have like walked through loss yourself,
Mm.
it's gut wrenching, it's devastating even that early on. Like I just thought I always wondered, like, lost that early, are you that connected? And it was so strange because I really felt connected to that baby m more than I really felt with Nora in pregnancy. So it was from the get-go, I was like, "Oh my gosh," like, I just felt so connected, so that loss was, like, huge.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, so after that, let's see, that was January of or end of December, January last year, whatever. So a couple months later, because we waited a little bit, because that's what they kind of recommend after miscarriage. So we tried again and we did get pregnant, and I was a wreck, not a wreck, but just nervous for
Sure.
at least the first, even through the middle of the second trimester of loss can happen at any time, and I had to really, like, be protective, like, of the things that I saw on social media or, like, stories that I listened to, like, I couldn't hear about loss.
Yeah.
While I was pregnant. Like,
Yeah.
it just especially if it was farther along than I was at that point, like, if I was
Yeah.
20 weeks and you hear one about 30 weeks, you're like, "Oh gosh." Like, and so it was like it's this helpless feeling of like I don't have control, like I can't I can't make this baby be healthy and come here, like I just have to like live in the present and live in this day. And like for me it was just praying like, okay, God, like
Oh, it froze. Oh dear. Olivia, come back. Oh, there you go.
but you're frozen.
Okay, you're back. Oh, we're getting a weird connection here. Oh, I hope I don't have to piece this together. I'm gonna stop the recording.
And see like
Okay, we had some internet glitches. We're back on. Hopefully I can mesh these two things together. We'll see.
got this. So yeah, it was just that piece of it was hard to hold
Oh, yeah.
throughout that process. And then I guess, oh, definitely a big thing to note was my search for a VBAC supportive provider. Like I
Yes.
didn't find my provider and my final provider until I was like 33 weeks pregnant. Like I had been to a well, this probably isn't appropriate, but I was gonna well, I'll just share it anyway. I called myself like a whore of providers. Like I had been
Yes.
to like 4, but I just nobody was the right one. Like I just thought um it just felt like they were feeding me yeses, but at the end of the day, when it came down to 38, 39 weeks, they weren't gonna be that yes for
The
me.
bait and switch. Yeah.
Yeah, so there was a lot of anxiety around finding the right provider and and feeling supported. I want um how do I phrase this? The doula I had in my first birth, there were many great things about her, but I still felt like some things were missing in
Hmm.
my birth experience. And so I also felt the pressure to find the right provider
Yeah.
because what if labor stalls? Is this doula gonna know what to do? Um, I just felt so much anxiety around finding the right people to support me and are they going to know what to do in different scenarios if baby's stuck, if whatever, how do we keep labor moving? And so yeah, I hopped around to different providers and I almost gave up on it again. The same coach that, said try for the VBAC was like, you're worth this. Find the right people, And I'm glad she said that because it's a lot mentally to
Yes.
keep trying to do that. And it's just stressful with insurance and all the just all the things. And I was still doing my business. I'm still a mom of at the
Uh-huh.
3 at that time, about to be 4. And it's like, I don't have capacity, and I'm glad I did. The one I ended up with was amazing. They
Can
were
you just give, don't tell the bad people or the people you
yeah.
chose to switch from, but I'd love to hear the name of your coach, your doula, and the provider that you used.
Yeah, so, I'm probably gonna butcher her last name, Ashton Colemas? Sorry, Ashton, if you're listening, but she's on Instagram, Resilient Mama Fitness. She's an incredible coach. We both have the same certification from Brianna Battles for pregnancy postpartum, but I knew I wanted her to be on my team. Like, she was just as an important player as the doula in the hospital, because she really understands birth and the pelvis, and I wanted somebody who was gonna program that stuff for me in my workouts, in my mobilities, help me prep for labor, and she was the lady for me, and she's awesome. So Ashton, and then Marcy Hadley was my doula this time around, and um she was great. She was what I needed in that in this birth experience, whatever. And then Connectus Midwifery, they are in Nashville and they were amazing. And I can't remember how many doulas are on their team, but or not doulas, sorry, midwives, but I
Mhm.
think there's 10. And I never met all of them, but every single one that I met, because it was towards the end of pregnancy, right? So I wasn't gonna meet them all. Um, they were amazing. They all felt like they were on the same page.
Yeah.
And they really cared, and one of them sat there and told me, I think I was 38 weeks, and she said, "If you have a C-section, it will be because you really needed one."
Oh, I love
And
that.
I left there with so much peace of okay, they're gonna do everything they can to help me have
Yeah.
this be, and if it's just not meant to be, it's not meant to be, but they're gonna fight for it? So
Yeah.
that was so peaceful, going into that, knowing that. And then my labor was so wildly different. I really thought I was anticipating a long one again. I was like, labor at home, don't go to the hospital too early. And this was 12 hours start to finish versus the 37. So
Like crazy.
very, very different. Yes. And I mean, I went into labor at 9 o'clock in the morning, and I was like, is this really it? I don't know. And it took a couple hours of some contractions to be like, yeah, this is something. This ain't Braxton Hicks over here. So do you want me to kind of just go into that?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
So I dropped my daughter off at preschool and I walked out the door, and that contraction, I was like, I think this is legit. I'm gonna go ahead and call my doula and call Marcy, ask her thoughts. So she told me, yeah, go ahead and time them. And I went to Nashville for an ultrasound because my amniotic fluid levels were a little higher than they liked. So they had been monitoring that. So ironically, I went to the same OB triage that I was gonna go into labor in that same day later. I just didn't I went there for the ultrasound, and I was there for like 2 hours, and I thought, if this is labor, I could be home resting right now. Like, I was really mad. I was like, I could be cleaning my house. I could be resting. This is taking forever. And so I was timing things, and they were kind of like every 7, 8 minutes, and very breathable, very doable. So I thought, oh, we'll be back here tonight, like later tonight. And I should be able to get Nora from preschool. Like, I was just calculating all the things. And then so I leave there, and I'd been there like 2.5, almost 3 hours. It was a long time. And I start heading home, and I have this one contraction in the car. And I'm like, oh, if this happens again in the car, I don't think I need to be driving. Like, that was really intense. And I hadn't eaten at that point. Like,
Oh.
it had been 6 hours since I'd eaten. And I was like, don't go into labor hungry. Like, all the things in my brain is like, I've got to stop somewhere, you know? Even though I feel like this is it. So I stopped at Chick-fil-A, my last meal. And I go in because the drive-thru's a nightmare at lunchtime, which it
Yeah.
was. And I was praying. I was like, Lord, I can't have a contraction in here. Like, I don't need people freaking out. I don't need it. And I'm
Bunch
talking
of
to
mamas in there in Chick-fil-A too.
this man who was like asking me about baby. And I'm like, please don't have a contraction. He'll freak out. And I made it through the whole thing, took my lunch, whatever, and I got home, and I barely got my lunch down. And then I started doing the mile circuit. That my doula was like, go ahead, like go for that. And that picked up within, like, I mean, I was home for an hour and a half from the time I got home, ate my lunch, to the time we left for the hospital.
Wow.
Things were like really picking up. And thankfully I had a friend go get my daughter from preschool, called her in the middle of a contraction. Cursing, maybe, you know. I was like, shit. And she knew. That's when I knew I was going to get Nora.
Yeah.
So my husband came home, and we got in the car. And I didn't realize it at the time, but my doula made it later. She's like, you were in transition in the car. So it was like a 40-minute drive to the hospital. And I wasn't officially timing them at that point because it was too difficult. But I'm laying in the back of my Honda Pilot because I could not bear the thought of sitting down. So I'm laying in the trunk on a suitcase and screaming with contractions. But I remember looking at my phone and being like, are you serious? It's only been a minute. Like, these just were like boom, 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 like 1 to 2 minutes apart for most of that ride. And it was the worst car ride ever. It was so miserable. And I'm so thankful we didn't get stuck in any traffic. And that was really dicey on a Friday going to Nashville.
That's
Uh,
crazy.
so that was just a godsend. So we get there, Hunter goes to park, and he like lets me go in quickly. And our doula's there, Marcy's there to meet me. And the lady at the front, the triage, she recognized me from the morning. She's like, oh, you're back. And at that point, when they check you into triage and you're ready to go, like, I was just so like, take me, why do we have to stop in this room? Like, can we just like get on with it? But they checked me, and I was a 9 at that
Wow.
point. Yeah, so it was pretty ready to rock and roll. So they waited for the next contraction. And then they were going to take me to whatever what do they call that? The next place you go.
Labor and delivery? Is that what it is?
I guess so, whatever. Go to the room I'm gonna, labor in and hope
Uh-huh.
birth, whatever. So we made it in there, and I actually had two midwives and two nurses. It was awesome because in both cases they were like shadowing the other person. I was like, I have a whole team of people. But at that point I was so like scared about the pain because it had
Oh.
been so intense in the car. And I was like,
Transitioned in the car. Yeah.
yeah, and I told Hunter I wanted an epidural, like, when we got there. And I told Marcy, I was like, I want an epidural. I want an epidural. And the midwife looks at me in the eyes, and she's like, look, if you really want a medicated birth or unmedicated birth, you can do this. Like,
Oh.
we can coach you through this, and I appreciated that she, took that moment. And I was like, no, I want an epidural. And then my husband, Hunter, he's like, what about nitrous oxide? Like, are you sure? Because he knew that I wasn't dead set on unmedicated, but I was interested in it at one point in time. And the midwife was like, you can do that, but if you do that, you'll lose your epidural window,
Mhm.
and nitrous oxide, doesn't totally, it's
Yeah.
not the same as epidural, right? It's just supposed to help you cope. Um, and so I ended up opting for the epidural. And I still wonder, because I think that slowed my labor down. Like,
Mhm.
I really think she probably would have been there in like an hour or two.
Yeah.
Because Hunter was like, that midwife was bending down to catch the baby while you were standing there making a decision about
You
this
had
episode.
already done the hard part.
Like every time I'd had a contraction, he said she was getting down to like prepare to catch this baby. But in the end, like I can weigh pros and cons, but the positives of that epidural, um, well, I'll cut to that at the end, but Marcy was amazing, first of all, because things kind of slowed down. I got nervous. Hunter and I were both like, and we talked about it later. We both were like, oh no, this is a lot like last time with Nora. Is this going to end in a C-section? And I was already like, just doubting my capability. I was like,
Oh,
I just
yeah.
don't know if I can do this. I don't know. And Marcy was wonderful. And the midwives, like they kept looking at my contraction pattern and noticing, okay, these are kind of irregular. We need to like change positions. We need to do this and that,
Yeah.
which I didn't have in my first birth at all. And so that was stuff that I was so concerned about. And I'm so grateful. Like this time I felt like people were really watching that and paying attention. And so we did that. And finally, one of the midwives that came in, she's like, okay, I think we're ready to push here. And we tried different positions and tried to help me feel connected to it and like what was the most productive push, in terms of position and breath. And I ended up doing two things I thought I was not going to do, like breath holding for me. I was like, you hear that, like, don't breath hold. But
Mhm.
you know what? That seemed I was more connected to it and it was a more productive push.
Okay.
Um, and I was on my back. But this time, because I was on my back with Nora, but this time Marcy offset my pelvis, right? So that my sacrum could move because the bones move when you give birth, right? Inside joke. So yeah, it was really such a sweet experience. Like pushing, if I could relive that experience, Amy, I would relive that. It was exactly what I hoped and prayed for. Like
Oh,
they had a mirror. I could see her, kind of like coming out, coming back in. And they're like, once she gets past your sacrum, like she's gonna stay put. But right now it's a little bit of a tease, with pushes.
yeah.
And I pushed for 3 hours, so I definitely think she would have came Emmy would have came quicker without the epidural. But like I said, we were having casual conversation and like I enjoyed it between contractions there, between pushes. And it was wonderful. And like we waited to find out, gender until she was born. So that was like a fun, we're
Yes.
saying boy or girl during pushing. And it was beautiful. And yeah, she came and it was just wonderful. And another perk of the epidural. So I enjoyed the pushing process, I think,
Okay.
because of that. Because
Okay.
it was manageable. I could feel
Yeah.
pressure, but I wasn't in so much pain that I couldn't like think or, I don't know. It helped me in that way. And then also they took like 2 hours to stitch me up. Um, so I had grade 2 tearing. So they said it wasn't super severe, but I guess it was intricate because they took a long time to stitch
A
me up.
long time. Yeah.
Yeah. And so if I hadn't had an epidural, I don't think I would have enjoyed that golden hour because I would have been miserable of them stitching me up. But
Yeah.
instead, like I was just holding her and like living on a high of like, oh my gosh, this actually like we did it,
Yeah.
and it wasn't a guarantee, so like just like reveling in the fact that we got to experience that it was amazing.
Oh, I love that. I mean, let's just take a moment to just enjoy that, you know?
Yeah.
Yes. I'm so glad you had some positive things to say about an epidural too, you
Mhm.
know? For women who are, on the fence and if
Yeah.
at the last moment they decide, okay, I don't want them to feel bad about making that
Yeah.
decision because there are perks. And for some women, it actually speeds up their labor because they can
Yeah.
actually relax, you know?
Right. Rest
So
or relax or yeah.
yeah, and we all make those choices, for so many different reasons, whether to do or not
Yeah.
to do the epidural. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know why the stitching took so long for you. That is a really long time. But what I like to remember or remind people is everything down there is swollen.
Yeah.
And so when we tear, it's hard to see the edges. It's hard to see where
Like
things
having to be more
fit.
careful with their stitching
Yeah.
because of that.
Yeah, yeah. So it is sensitive tissue that is expanded. It's full of blood flow because our body is, sending blood down there. There's a lot of care that needs to be taken too. So yeah, yeah.
Yeah, when I don't remember, it was probably a few days after being home from the hospital, but when I took a look, because you know me, I
I
have
love
to.
it. I'm
Some
so
people that are
glad.
like, oh, not looking, but I like knowing what I know is like I have to look at this. And
Mhm.
my husband and I were both like, what happened down there? Like,
Right?
oh my gosh. My husband was like, it looks like somebody took a chainsaw. And I was like, yeah, like, but it's been cool, and I love like Hunter's been amazing in terms of like he wants to check it out. Like, hey, let's see how we're healing. Like,
Aw.
it doesn't bother him, it doesn't gross him out or weird him out, like as it shouldn't, but
Right.
some whatever. But he's been really great about yeah, just like let's see the state of affairs.
And you've normalized it too by taking a mirror. I always recommend women look and see what
Yeah.
they've got going on before pregnancy, even, and certainly during that process. Yeah.
It was wild just to look at, and I don't know how much you want me to share on this, but like my constipation, but I hate to use that word lightly because it was more than that for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, that did not help the situation
Let's let's
healing
talk about
either.
your healing journey because it was tough, So
Yeah.
I think constipation is a part of that. And I always tell all my clients, poop as soon as you can, because the longer we wait, the more fearful we are of it and the harder it is to do.
So I think this is my theory, but I think my body responds to epidurals, medication. It responds with not just constipation, but like fecal impaction. Like this is not just, oh, take a Colace and it's gonna come out. I
Mhm.
had problems with Nora, and I thought, oh, it's because I had like two epidurals, I had two spinals, like I had a lot of medication. So I thought, oh, it's just because I had so much. And then the pain medication they give you after C-section is also known for
Yep.
constipation. So I just thought, okay, that's what happened. So this time around, it was like day two in the hospital, and we were ready to go home, but I hadn't had a bowel movement yet. And I could feel like the same sort of feeling I had with Nora when it was like, I haven't pooped and my stomach's really hurting. Like I can tell like there needs to be a movement, but I don't feel the need to go, but my stomach is hurting.
Yeah.
And that was not fun in the hospital. Won't dive into that, but we ended up coming home because we just knew, okay, we know how to navigate this. They're not really helping us here. And so like all graphic all graphicness here, but Hunter gloves a finger and has to like dig it out, and
Yeah.
I was crying in the shower at the hospital because I was like, I just really thought he wouldn't have to do that again. And he was so sweet about it. He's like, baby, I don't care, like, but I felt so bad. Like I didn't want him to have to do that ever again because that's so it's humbling and it's nasty.
Yeah.
Uh, but when he was first trying to help me, he couldn't find my butthole, my anus. He couldn't find it because like things were just so weird down there. Like I had to help him figure it out. But I wonder if he kind of accidentally hit one of the stitches
Okay.
at first, because that's the part that still is having trouble healing now.
Yeah.
So that was like kind of part of recovery number one. Like that was kind of a trauma to my rectum of like, okay, we just had a baby and then we had trouble with poop and we've had to like manually mess with stuff that's trying to heal. Uh,
Right.
so yeah, I took Colace and I drank, but I ended up drinking magnesium citrate, the kind that totally like flushes you out.
Yeah.
After Hunter felt like he's like, okay, I don't feel anything like really hard stuck anymore. I think you just need to like keep it moving. So the magnesium citrate was what worked for me. And then I just kept on top of like fibers, stool softeners, water, squatty potty. I kept on top of all the things I needed to do. And then after like a week or two, things were like not painful anymore
Okay.
and they were smooth. And so that was like one piece of recovery. And then I couldn't sit like for the first like 4 weeks almost, like sitting hurt. It's like I'd have to sit in the recliner and lean back, or like driving, or not driving, but riding in the car because I wasn't driving, but or like even sitting in this chair, like I couldn't do that.
Mhm.
It was so uncomfortable. So I would like lean to the side if I absolutely had to sit. So that was just really uncomfortable for
It was
me.
uncomfortable, not necessarily at your rectum, but like your vulva, kind of where you had
Yeah,
torn.
I
Yeah.
feel like, yeah, mostly vulva, and now there's still discomfort, but I feel like that is more on that perineum, right? Where that part that hasn't healed for me is, that is still uncomfortable. It's manageable. It's not terrible like it was, but it's still kind of there.
Yeah.
But I can do it. So it's definitely better. And then let's see. Everything else, so I went back for my appointment with midwives last week, and they said everything else had healed well. I had some tears in my labia, as well as perineum, but the perineal tear is still like, it's just kind of raw. And so we're using topical estrogen and hoping that
That's
that does
exactly
that.
what I would recommend. I think that's a
But
good, yeah.
I really don't want to get stitched up again.
Yeah.
But if I do, I do. Like I want it to heal well, right? But that's been the main thing. And then like peeing myself, man, like that really, that shocked me. Like I didn't understand. Like I remember getting out of the bed at the hospital to go to the bathroom for the first time, and I stood up and I was like, there is fluid gushing out of me. Like
Mhm.
I had no sensation that I had to pee
No.
at all. And it just like, and I
Yep,
was
it
just,
just lets go. Yeah.
I was mind blown. Like that was something I didn't know going into vaginal.
Oh.
I've never heard anybody talk about
Oh,
that.
I try to warn all my clients that if you, I always say, if you stand up and you pee, don't even worry about it because your brain and pelvic floor is just not connected yet. You just put
Yeah.
the pee out, right?
Yep.
Uh,
Yep. So that was like really surprising. And it took, I feel like it took about 3 weeks
mhm.
to even like have the sensation. Like I just had to go like stay on top of going to the
Yeah.
bathroom
Tell
regularly.
people don't count the first 2 weeks if you leak. Just, wear your supportive
Yeah.
undergarments and just don't stress out about
Yeah.
that because we're still trying to obviously get back
Yeah.
on the line.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that didn't freak me out because I figured that was the case, but I was just surprised because I hadn't heard anybody really talk about that. Like I anticipated some leaking, but not like full on,
Gosh.
oh, we're just letting it all come out. So that's definitely a lot better. I mean, like I at almost 8 weeks now, like I have the sensation, I know when I need to go. But I definitely still leak. And it's enough. If I didn't have a pad on, I would change pants. Like if it's
Okay.
sneezing,
Okay.
um, and it's sneezes that are multiples, like, 1 is fine, but if it's, like, 4, it's that last one, and something about, like, I'm trying to inhale without inhaling too deep, but if I take a really big inhale, that exhale is just, like, too much. Like, I
Okay.
can't do it yet, so,
Yeah. And I just
yeah,
want to insert in here,
yeah,
Olivia is seeing a pelvic floor PT.
yeah,
She's already been to one visit. So for all of y'all who are stressing out about her leaking,
yeah.
she'll nip this in the bud, but she's very early in her journey.
Yes, and that's the thing, like, I'm not freaked out about it because I know,
Yeah.
but if I had because I didn't really have that with Nora, like, I didn't have that experience. I had prolapse instead, but
Yeah.
I didn't have leaking to deal with, and so, like, I think I would have really freaked out
Mhm.
then, but
Yeah.
knowing what I know now and how resilient the body is and that I won't deal with this forever,
Nope.
I know that, so, like, it's cool, but yes, thank you for mentioning that. Sometimes I forget that not everybody does know that stuff. That's
Yeah.
why we're here, right? Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, it's gonna get better 100%. And when I got assessed yesterday, they were saying like weakness, like there's a lot of weakness there, and that's understandable. Like that's normal at this point in postpartum.
Yep.
Um, so I'm cool with that. Like my quick flicks, like there's some weakness there, and then just trying like a general like squeeze as hard as I can. Like that's definitely not what it was. But again, working on it, and
Yeah.
I'm more connected to my core and pelvic floor because I stayed that way during pregnancy. Like, and
Okay.
that's why I wanted Ashton to be my coach, is I wanted to carry as much over into postpartum as I could. And granted, the first few weeks, like I thought about my pelvic floor, but like it wasn't online, even if I tried to
Yeah.
contract. But I just kept showing up because I knew, like, okay, it's there. That mind body connection is there. It just needs to be restored and pave the path a little bit again. So right now, like, I'm more connected than definitely than I like, C-section, I didn't have a clue,
Mhm.
but, like, I'm so much more connected to my core and pelvic floor. Is it weak? Yes, but is it online? Yes. So
Yes. And I think there's so many pieces to that. Like you said, with the first one, number one is the C-section. They're cutting through multiple layers of tissue, including our abdominals, which connect right to our pelvic floor, right? But you were a first time mom. We don't know what we don't know. And now
yeah,
you're better educated from just being a mom and being through part of the journey, but also your work and being a postpartum pregnancy coach, so yeah, there's different layers. But then you think about our pelvic floor with a vaginal delivery. I mean, it stretches up to 350%. Yeah, those muscles are weak. Yeah, they're not coordinated great. I mean, I always
yeah.
use the example if our quad stretched 350%, we wouldn't be able to walk for months afterwards. And, our pelvic floor stretches and it's just a day of the week.
I love this example. I don't think I've heard that with your quads. That's a
Yeah.
good one to, like, use for people.
Can you
I mean,
imagine? Yes. Yeah.
just insane. It's wild, like, that what the
And then we're
body can do.
expecting our bladder and bowels and
Yeah,
sneezing and everything to work properly, but there's been a significant change. And yes, I believe our bodies are made to do this and they can do this. And no, we're not broken, but we have to allow that healing time.
yeah,
That's, 350% is no small feat. And then if we have a tear on top of that, the
yeah.
muscles cannot contract properly because they are healing, literally healing
Yeah.
back together.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I think it was Sarah Duvall, I heard her say once that birth is a trauma, and I really resonated with that. Even if it was a beautiful birth
Yeah.
and it was all that you wanted, like, it's still a trauma to the body. So, like, taking that into account and understanding, like, there healing is gonna be it's a process and it's not linear and, like,
Yeah.
lean into that. Yeah.
There's no quick fix, and we just have to kind of go through it and learn what we can through the process. And it takes energy to heal. I mean, we're sleep deprived with a new baby. We're figuring out how to make milk and feed this baby and fit this baby into our family system. Even our
Yes.
body is using energy also to heal. Even if
Yeah.
we didn't tear or didn't have a C-section, it's still
Yeah.
a
It still
significant
needs to
stretch.
heal.
Yeah, it's a significant stretch on our abdomen, on our diaphragm, on our pelvic floor. You know,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Okay, so one thing before we started recording, you were just talking about how you wanted to be further along in your fitness than you are.
Yeah.
And this is so real. And I wish, I mean, and maybe y'all can go back to her like Instagram or something and see how fit Olivia has been through her life. Just lifting weights, but also doing like aerial work. Like you weren't just like your average workout mom. Like you were in extremely good fit shape, right?
Oh, I
Strong.
that's so funny because I see other people and I'm like, "Oh, I wanna be up
You were strong.
there."
Yeah.
But yeah, well, I'm a type A, and all the type A people that love to work out understand that. Like, yeah, I just had expectations. Like, I knew, okay, postpartum, we're starting from scratch. We're gonna rehab. But I also had this unnamed expectation of myself of like, okay, I really want to try to have sort of, I don't want to say aggressive, but like a little bit of a fast-paced recovery because I know what I know, you
Yeah.
know? And
Yep.
so I thought, okay, well, if I start this stuff in pregnancy, I'm thinking, okay, if I start this stuff in the early weeks, by like 7, 8 weeks postpartum, I might be lifting medium loads, like nothing, not PRing, not super heavy, but just like things that feel like I'm working a little bit.
Yeah.
And that is not the case at all. That is not where I'm at. I and I could, but I don't think I
No,
should.
no,
I
you're
could
not.
lift more than I'm doing right now, but I know my body is telling me no. Like the leaking
Mhm. Yep.
and just what I feel in terms of like engaging my core, it it is not ready for loads like that, So like for me, I'm doing a lot of breath work and
Mhm.
I'm still trying to find consistency in all of this too,
Yep.
Like that's because I'm back at work a little quicker than I planned, but it's because I wanted to be uh
Mhm.
in terms of like creating content and like trying to ramp up services and coaching and stuff like that. So I'm navigating all that stuff. My 4-year-old feeding this baby, pumping this, that, meal planning, my business, like all those things. And so like learning to fit my movement in consistently, I'm still struggling with. And I think people need to know that too. That's
Yes.
okay. Like I've I'm having grace for myself most days of like, okay, if nothing else, get some breath in, and so I'm squatting with at least something that weighs Emmy's weight, baby's
Okay.
weight, because I have to do that anyway. I have to lift that freaking heavy car seat no
Mm,
matter what.
right.
So
Right.
I'm going to do movements that I'm already having to do. Lunges, because those were really hard at first, getting off the floor. Even without Emmy or without holding a
Yeah.
human, just getting up was like, man, that feels so yucky on my pelvic floor.
Mhm.
Now it feels much better. And almost like not really symptomatic at all, body weight stuff. So I'm just trying to keep that stuff moving, like lunges, getting up off the floor in various ways, squats, core work, glutes, hamstrings, like just a lot of body weight and
Mm.
simple stuff. But again, I know my body needs that. And the only way to get to where I want to be in the gym is to do the small stuff, do the not fun stuff, the not sexy stuff.
It is. It's the boring stuff, but it's to rebuild, to
Yeah.
rebuild those connections and slowly bring
Yeah.
back our strength. Yeah. And, you mentioned lunges. And I think people forget how hard these are postpartum because we have the pelvic instability and the hormones
Yeah.
are still there trying to regulate. Yes. But, and it's not just prolactin. I think that and relaxin, they get a bad rap, but even estrogen changes will change the laxity of our joints and tissues. So there's a lot of hormones still trying to regulate
A
there.
lot.
A
Yeah.
lot, but that's the most common thing I get postpartum is that people are not where they want to be, or they didn't, I hate the term, but bounce back like they
Oh,
thought, or
oh
maybe
yeah.
they bounced back after one and the next one is taking
Yeah.
significantly longer. And it takes so much grace and just consistency and time. And you're right, you're sleep deprived and you're managing, a sleep schedule for this one, a daycare schedule for that one. It's a lot
Yeah.
of work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been a journey, but I think it helps that I'm mentally in a better space because I know what I know.
Yeah.
Knowledge is power, man, and that's why I want to keep sharing that. And I know that's why you're so passionate too, is
Yeah.
is mentally I understand like this is not forever. And I know that I'm resilient and I know that I will get to do all the things that I love if I keep showing up and putting in the work now, little
Mhm.
by little.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Oh, there's so much good stuff here. And I could probably do 4 podcast episodes with you because we didn't even touch on this, but, we will talk later on another episode about your prolapse journey too.
yeah, yeah.
Um, I want to kind of, just because we're focusing on the VBAC, is there anything, and I know you've mentioned some things along the way, but if we had to summarize the most helpful things you did either for achieving a VBAC or success, and I know you've had a hard journey, but success with the VBAC, I want to know what was helpful for you and maybe if there's anything you would have done differently.
Mm, helpful. I think for me, this is just my case, but mentally, that is like where I really needed the most support because
Mm,
I had a lot of self-doubt about it. Like I was all for anyone can do this, but I'm not sure about me. Like,
yeah.
I could cheerlead anybody else but myself. I had a lot of like deep-seated doubt about it. I was like, I don't know if I'm capable. And so I think that's why I had so much pressure on myself to like pick the right people around me. But I would say have the right people, like the support team that you need. And so for me, that was a doula. I knew I wanted a doula. I knew I wanted, um, and not everybody can do, like financially, I know that can be a lot to like a doula, a coach. So I'm really thankful that I was able to do that. But even like Ashton is amazing. If you follow her on Instagram, she's got a wonderful guide that is designed for it's a lot of the stuff she put in my programming, like labor prep, pushing and breathing and mobilities for the pelvic floor and all of that. Like, so that's a wonderful way that people can invest in themselves without having to, go full blown coach. But like still educate. So that or some like Mama Stay Fit, their birth course, I did that too. So something like that. Like really educate yourself
Mhm.
in ways that you need. Um and have the right people around you um, that will fight for you, like that will fight for what you want. I don't know if that's helpful or
No, that's
condensing.
very helpful.
Yeah, like a team and just education and loose hands, man. Like like you have to hold the whole entire thing with really
Oh,
good hands
I love
and
it.
know that like this may not turn out how I hope,
Mhm.
but I know that and I'm willing to try. Like that's your decision.
Beautiful.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I don't know if there's anything I would change. I still wonder about that epidural because I just
Okay.
like would I have torn too? Because I would have been standing. Like, would gravity have helped me? I
Mhm.
don't know. You never know. But at the end of the day, I'm glad that things went the way they did.
I think tearing, I always tell people, I always recommend perineal massage, not because I think that it can reduce the risk of tearing. I think it does more desensitization for us to handle the
Yeah.
actual pushing phase and birthing phase. Um,
Thank you.
but
Yes, I feel that.
but I had an epidural and I still had a second degree tear. I did perineal massage. I still had a second degree
Yeah.
tear. And I was on my back only for the pushing, and that was at the doctor's request, but I labored the whole time upright. And at the last second, the doctor was like, I need her on her back. And we tried to fight it, but I was fighting everything in my story. Um,
Oh,
but I don't think even the back positioning, because I wasn't there long and my pushing phase was not long.
yeah.
So I just sometimes think perineum's tear, we're getting a baby
Yeah.
out of a smaller hole than the baby's head, So
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
my doctor, even I was getting perineal massage from the doctor while delivering too.
Yeah.
It felt like gallons of lube were being put down,
Yeah.
you know.
Slip
But
and slide.
so I don't always think, that we can prevent tears as much as I would love to say, hey, we can. I think sometimes we do all the right things and our tissues are just like, that's a lot of stretch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, 100%. And I did some of that, but I didn't do as much as I probably should have. But at the end of the day, like there was a lot on my plate mentally of like, okay,
Mhm.
pelvic pelvic wand, pelvic release work. I was doing that, the mile circuit, trying to fit that in a few times a week, like all the things, drink the tea, eat the dates, whatever. So my mind was
Yeah.
just it was too much. And I was like, whatever. Like if I fit this in once a week, cool. So like whatever, like, at the end of the day, I think there are things you can do to help, but I think being all consumed by all the things is also not good for you either, and,
Loose hands.
yeah, that should I do a post? Loose hands.
I know you should and tag me. No, but I always tell
I will,
people,
I'm gonna do it.
I always tell people, keep your face relaxed, loose jaw, loose pelvic floor, loose eyebrows, loose pelvic floor. Same thing, loose hands. Like the more open we are in birthing, the easier it is. But I think through the process too. I mean, that's such a good phrase in life, not just pregnancy and postpartum. But I think
Wow.
we can't hold too tight to things
Well,
anyway.
my little human, I think, is ready to eat.
Yes, yes. Okay. So I will put all your information. Y'all please check out Olivia and LivWell Coaching. She's phenomenal. Thank you for your time
Thank
and
you
this
for having
so
me.
much. And yeah, so I'll talk to y'all soon. I'm gonna pause this.